Okay, good morning, everybody. Let's get started. My name is Shoji Nakayama with Purdue University Northwest, and I'll be facilitating this safety seminar along with Stephanie Van Diver with Diversified Marketing. Welcome to the Northwest Indiana Business Roundtable, or NWIBRT, and American Society of Safety Professionals, ASSP, Safety Seminar. Thank you very much for joining. Today, we'll be learning about effective ways to maintain and improve employee engagement and focus. This topic is vital for organizations in today's competitive market and can be applied to various industries. Engagement helps reduce turnover and can make employees feel passionate about their work. This session is being recorded and will be posted on NWIBRT YouTube page following the event. All attendees are automatically muted, and we ask that you keep yourself muted until the end of each presentation for Q&A session. If you have any question you would like to ask our presenters during the Q&A session at the end of each presentation, please type and send your questions through the Zoom chat function, which should be located at the bottom part of your screen. We will try to get to as many questions as we can. All attendees will receive a quick survey following the webinar. We appreciate your feedback so that we can create new content, educational and networking programs that are designed to meet our members' needs and wants and help us improve for future seminar. Last but not least, the views and opinions expressed during this program are those of the persons appearing on the program. Do not necessarily reflect the views and opinion of NWIBRT Board of Directors, ASSP, or other entities that may be associated with today's production. At this moment, we would like to be briefly introduce two organizations that helped organize today's safety seminar and assistant professionals in Northwest Indiana.
Hi, everyone. NWIBRT, Northwest Indiana Business Roundtable, is an independent, nonprofit council of local firms committed to the improvement and construction of maintenance projects here in Northwest Indiana. Its purpose is to promote safety, quality, and cost-effective solutions to challenges faced by owners, contractors, and labor in our region. NWIBRT provides an ongoing forum of which peers and colleagues can meet to share information and discuss mutual interests such as job site safety, training, conductibility, project management, productivity, labor relations, and facility maintenance. If you would like more information on NWIBRT, please go to NWIBRT.org for more information. If you don't already, NWIBRT is active on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, so please follow our social media pages and subscribe to our YouTube channel to keep up to date with all NWIBRT information and events. For those who are interested and NWIBRT members, we celebrate safety and we'll be celebrating on August 19th at the awards banquet, and we are still taking applications for Outstanding Craftsperson Safety Leader. It's a great way to recognize someone from your company who's going above and beyond in their craft and in safety. Those awards will be acknowledged at the CAF NWIBRT Safety Awards, which I said will be August 19th this year at Avalon Manor. Tickets and sponsorship information is available right now at NWIBRT.org. We also have our NWIBRT Hard Hat Charity Golf Outing. It will be Friday, September 17th at White Hawk Country Club. If you're interested in participating, please contact NWIBRT, either call or email. We are almost sold out for this event, so if you're interested in sponsoring or being a part of it, please let us know as soon as possible. The Spring Safety Seminar, as well as other programs that NWIBRT does throughout the year, would not be possible without our partners. We appreciate their support in all that we do throughout the year. We'd like to thank our elite partners, MCOR Higher Electric, Franciscan Health, and MJ Electric. We'd also like to thank our premier partners, Local 395 Ironworkers, and Northwest Indiana Building and Construction Trades Council. And we would also like to thank our core partners, Central Crane, Corellis, Laborers Local 41, LGH, the lifting experts, Milestone, Orbital Engineering, the Ross Group, the Pangier Corporation, and Steel City Steels. If you would like more information about NWIBRT's partnerships and the availability, please visit NWIBRT.org or contact us. Thank you.
Another organization that assisted today's seminar is ASSP, American Society of Safety Professionals. For over 100 years, ASSP has supported occupational safety and health professionals to prevent workplace injuries, illnesses, and fatalities. ASSP provides education, advocacy, standards development, and professional community to our members in order to advance their careers and the OSH profession as a whole. Some of the mission include sharing knowledge of safety through symposium, networking event, continuing education offerings, publication of professional journals, and more. ASSP provides networking opportunity with more than 36,000 members in 80 countries, where they connect safety and health professionals to a vast community of peers, resources, and opportunities. For more information about ASSP and would like to join, please visit ASSP.org. A special appreciation goes to our 2021 Spring Safety Seminar sponsors. Gold sponsors was provided by Construction Advancement Foundation, also known as CAF. And silver sponsor is provided by Total Safety. We thank you for their support. Today we have two sessions. Our first speakers both join us from Magid. Kathie Madsen is a district sales manager for Maggot. She has been in the safety business for over 30 years and has her QSSP, Qualified Safety Sales Professional Certification, which is her OSHA 30-hour. Her focus is on providing application-based product solutions to customers across multiple industries. Beth Sutherland has been writing for business and news outlet for over 20 years. She is currently the senior safety writer at Magid and the editor of Safety Matters, a resource center at maggotglove.com with free safety information and tools designed to make every safety manager's job a little easier. She spent the last 5 years sitting down with many safety managers, asking them to share their secrets. Presenters, if you are going to use any movie clips, please be reminded to check the share audio box when you first start sharing your screen. So that said, please welcome Kathie and Beth.
Well, thank you, Soji. Hello and welcome to our webinar, Building Safety Engagement. We'll spend some time in the next hour talking about just that and sharing ideas both from Magid's experience and from the many safety managers we've spoken to through the years who've shared what's worked for them. For those of you who aren't familiar with all that Magid can do for you,
Kathie, if you can hold on 1 second. Unfortunately, everyone, I cannot share my screen. It's disabled. So Shoji, if you could fix that before we go on.
Okay. Stephanie.
There we go.
Oh. There you go.
All right. Okay.
All right. So for those who aren't familiar with all that Magid can do for you, we innovate safety for you. Magid is a leading innovator and manufacturer of the latest in PPE technology. We provide head-to-toe PPE protection to meet any safety need. And as a manufacturer selling direct, we share your challenges with workers of our own, having to walk the talk ourselves. We distribute for over 700 leading safety brands. And finally, our safety experts are available to answer your questions, conduct on-site assessments, and tackle your toughest safety challenges.
All right, so for our agenda today, we'll start out talking about the concept of safety culture and how the best safety cultures are built on engagement. We'll move on to safety training ideas, ways to increase compliance, tips for increasing worker engagement, and finally what we like to call cultivating your safety minions. We'll wrap up by answering any questions you may have, and we encourage you to go ahead and enter any questions in the chat as you think of them, and we'll answer as many as we can as time permits. So before we dive in, we'd like to do a quick poll to get an idea of the size of your workforce. How many people are you working with to try to get engagement? All right, so most of us pretty large companies. It looks like just a couple are smaller, pretty much all over the board. So thanks so much. It's really good to know how many people you're trying to get engaged. So let's get into it and start with safety culture, since we know that true company-wide engagement grows from a solid safety culture. So at the highest levels, safety culture can be measured on a scale. So one of the best known is the DuPont-Bradley curve. It talks about where an organization falls in terms of both compliance and also stress level. So phase one is reactive. People tend to be non-compliant. The attitude is, I won't do it. The environment tends to be negative and high stress. The company is often acting after an incident or an OSHA citation or in response to a new regulation. So in this phase, the safety culture is completely reliant on the safety manager. Phase two is dependent. Workers are compliant for the most part, but the attitude is, I have to do it. The environment is more neutral, but still high stress. And you do see supervisors and rules, discipline, training, a little better proactivity, but still completely reliant on the safety manager. Phase three is independent. Workers are committed and engaged. The attitude is, I want to do it. And this environment is positive and the stress is lower. The company is proactive. There's internalization of safety rules, a true understanding of why, and usually some recognition. But it's kind of every worker for himself. So the ideal is phase four, interdependent. Again here, workers are compliant because they want to be. The environment is positive and stress is lower. The company is proactive and engaged. So people take pride in the work, pride in the safety record, and most significantly, they care about and look out for each other. And of course, as you move along in the phases, injury rates tend to drop. So taking a cue from OSHA, they tell us that for a program to succeed, workers must participate in developing and implementing every element of the safety and health program.
I've worked with several customers who elect to participate in OSHA's Voluntary Protection Program, or VPP. The program recognizes employers and workers who've implemented safety and health management systems and maintain low injury rates for their respective industries. To participate, they must undergo a rigorous on-site evaluation by a team of safety and health professionals, but once you get the certification, it's held proudly as the industry gold standard.
And this is a one-time certification, Kathie, or do they have to keep qualifying?
No, while the PP participants are exempt from OSHA programmed inspections, they need to maintain being in the program and are reevaluated every 3 to 5 years.
Okay. So for our next poll, we'd like you to share what level you think your own safety culture is at today. So is it phase one, reactive, phase two, dependent, phase three, independent, or phase four, interdependent? All right, so it's nice to see nobody's stuck down at phase one. We have quite a few people doing really well, phase three, phase four, and really wherever you landed, even if you think your culture, your safety culture has reached level 4, there are always ideas to keep you there, and we'll have lots of those to share today. All right, so we're gonna start with the first key aspect of building safety engagement, and that is, of course, training. So we're going to talk about 3 ways to train. Obviously, there are many more ways to train than these 3, but these are our focus today. So in classroom, formal training, mentorship and safety coaching, and everyday training and reminders. So for most of us, classroom training includes some kind of slide deck. Most safety trainers have their own library of these, and you can put them together yourself. You can purchase them, or shameless plug for Magid, you can log on to Magid's Resources Center and download classes for free. We'll share how to do that at the end. Many people find that not only do people get more engaged, but the lessons stick if they include more hands-on exercises. So we spoke to a safety manager in the manufacturing industry, and he used a method he called dress a coworker for the job. So he'd ask for a volunteer and say, okay, Bob is going to be welding today. What does he need? How should he wear it? And the class would actually dress Bob in the right PPE, and then they discuss and critique whether Bob was going to be safe from hazards. The same guy was a big advocate of letting class participants do things like cut into a cut-resistant glove or hit an impact glove, so people could really understand how their PPE worked and what was involved.
You're right, Beth. Visuals is key. When discussing hand protection, I typically hold up a bulky leather glove and a thinner cut-resistant knit and ask which will provide more cut protection. Somebody will invariably point to the leather style, with the thought being that the bulky nature of the glove equates to protection. If you imagine, leather is a skin, and it can and will cut like butter. With new materials to market, we've achieved higher level of protection in more form-fitting knits. And in some of these, like our Aerodex line, they literally feel like bare hands, but still provide cut protection as high as an A7 or soon to be A9 level.
Yeah, it's just incredible, the new technology that's out there now that really wasn't just a few years ago. And that brings up an important point. Whether it's technology or procedures or whatever it is, always explain the why. Nobody likes to do something because I said so, and workers are human, and they're more likely to follow the rules if they understand the good reasons behind them. So the last type of training for engagement is safety games. This is really just inserting fun and playing games, and it's a very effective way to get people engaged so that they remember their safety lessons. We heard from a food industry safety professional who had actually set up a safety scavenger hunt as part of his training. And he'd create fake hazard setups throughout the facility and ask workers if they could spot the hazards and describe what's wrong. And if they get it right, they were entered into a prize drawing. And of course, it's important to make sure people learned what you wanted them to learn. And this might take the form of one-on-one check-ins afterward. What did you learn? What was the most important takeaway? Or even quizzes afterward, and they retake the class if they fail. So this brings us to mentorship, which is extremely important if you have high turnover or even just a lot of newer workers. And the statistics really tell the story here. Ages 15 to 19, so we're talking about work-related injuries that landed people in the ER. So 15 to 19, the rate is over 2 times greater than older workers, 25 and older. 20 to 24 is a little better, but still almost twice as common.
Younger workers can tend to be intimidated by speaking up. They feel they haven't earned the right. It's important to let them know they have the ability to stop work if they feel it's unsafe. Mentorship and teaching your younger or newer workers can take a lot of different forms, just about all of which engage not only the workers, but veteran workers as well. Mentors close to retiring. Have your best retiring workers train new hires. Newbies get the value of someone's lifetime of experience. Other mentors. We spoke to a safety manager in oil and gas who would assign formal mentors to each new worker. The mentors were responsible for showing newbies how to apply the training that they had just completed and guide them through their first project. He found that it was not only good for safety, but it also eliminated redoing work that was done incorrectly. Competency testing. Some states require competency testing, some don't, but it's a very useful way to make workers prove that they can do the job before you let them out on the line. The next two are less mentorship and more new worker focused, but it's helpful to have a formal check-in 30 days after they start. We all know normalization of deviance can be a big problem as new workers tend to pick up bad habits from others, which of course is a bad kind of engagement. So at a 30-day check, you review the rules and make sure they're still doing things right. And finally, a 90-day check-in can reinforce lessons and actually improve your future training. The idea here is to ask your 90-day workers what they've learned on the job and what they'd wish they'd been taught or prepared for in their first week. Use those lessons to add to or modify your initial training.
Beyond mentorship, there are ways you can coach all levels of workers to keep them engaged and help them remember the safety lessons. So as we mentioned before, explain. The lesson sticks much better if they know the why as well as the what. Repetition. This can take the form of verbal reminders and short follow-up training in various forms. So we'll talk more about some of those a little bit later. Empowerment. Younger generations especially want to know that they can speak up if they see a problem. But really, this is good for any generation. It discourages that get or done mentality that can lead to accidents. Observation, this is huge. Many supervisors rely heavily on unannounced observations, but the secret is that it's a good mix, of announced and unannounced observations really might work better. The value in an announced observation is that you see them doing the job in the way that they feel it's the safest. And that can tell you a lot in terms of where you need extra lessons or explanations. And finally, delegation to your safety minions. You can't be everywhere all the time. And the most engaged safety cultures have reliable people who can act as your assistant safety coaches. We'll have a little bit more on that later. So lastly, the last training point is everyday training and reminders. We've all crammed for a test and forgotten everything the day after. And this is why we say safety training should never be a one and done. Engagement in training should continue outside the classroom, and there are lots of ways to do that. So some good examples, on-site safety talks. We spoke to a safety manager in utilities, and every day before the job began, he would gather management and workers alike to talk about the hazards. Anyone could contribute concerns and talk about any conditions that might increase hazards. So it rained last night, things are going to be slippery, or it's supposed to be 100 degrees today. Does everybody have their body cooling PPE? Posted reminders, another shameless plug, Magid offers these for free.
As a follow-up to that, if you're using posters, make a schedule to rearrange them once a month or even once a week to keep the message fresh. Also, be sure to look for posters that are brief. A poster needs to get the message across as concisely as possible so people read it all. Keep it simple.
Definitely great advice. Another useful way to engage people is fun safety videos, sometimes called microlearning, sometimes called burst training. You can also get these free from our website. Humor is memorable, and you do whatever it takes to keep safety at the top of their minds. Follow-up, as we mentioned before, 30 days after, 90 days after, even right away. And lastly, we liked an engagement idea that we got from a safety professional in manufacturing so much that we made a video about it. It's called Giving a Safety Pop Quiz. So let's take a look.
Every 7 seconds, a worker is injured on the job. So it's important to find fun and new ways to remind our crews to work safe, like a pop quiz. Test your workers' knowledge by randomly asking them questions about your safety protocols. It's a great way to reinforce your safety rules. If they get it right, give them a reward. And if they get it wrong, teach them. Hey Brittany, pop quiz.
Oh.
When operating a forklift, what PPE should you wear?
Your safety glasses, hearing protection, and your seatbelt.
That's right, nice job. Here's a t-shirt.
Cool.
Try this fun technique to test your workers' knowledge and make sure they're keeping safety top of mind.
All right, so we'd love to know how you're training, and that brings us to our next poll. What forms of training do you use regularly? So please check all that apply. All right, so mostly toolbox talks, no surprises there. A lot of formal classroom presentations, absolutely. Looks like we've got a really good mix, even some safety pop quiz, which I love. All right, so as I mentioned, no matter how you're training, we'll provide some helpful resources at the end of the talk. So let's talk now about compliance, which is something that's on every safety manager's mind. Here too, the key to compliance is in finding various ways that you can engage with your employees and get them to engage with each other. So again, we see and speak to safety professionals every day in what we do, and we've gathered some of the most memorable ideas that we've heard them use. So the first is what we've called the friendly passive-aggressive approach, little ways to get the point across using just a touch of humor so people get the message without necessarily feeling harassed.
A safety manager in a loud manufacturing environment told us if he saw workers without their hearing protection, he'd walk up to them and pretend to talk to them without making any noise, just moving his lips. It was his friendly reminder of what they might experience in their lives if they damaged their hearing.
Another guy in manufacturing had a lot of trouble with workers skipping their safety glasses. So wearing them on top of their head, at the back of their neck. So he would actually walk around the facility with a packet of ping pong balls with eyes drawn on them. And everyone knew if they got caught without their glasses, the manager might give them the eye as he'd just hand them a ping pong ball eye, and enough said. They knew they had to get those safety glasses on. An oil and gas guy shared a technique with us that he called Catholic guilt. We renamed it the ripple effect. Basically, he made sure that all his people knew if they got injured, it's not just them suffering. It's 120 families, because he shared that the company might get fines, expenses could jeopardize the company picnic, raises, maybe even promotions. And the message was, it's not just you that you're risking. There's also the Big Brother method. We spoke to a food manufacturer who had a contamination incident. A box cutter ended up in a bag of food that was actually sold to a consumer. And he already had a program in place to check everyone's PPE compliance before they stepped onto the line. And he added a program to check workers after each shift to be certain that anything they brought onto the line was coming back off with them. And finally, humor, fun, and encouragement, which is my personal favorite. We said earlier that humor is memorable and engaging. It can be effective to use training videos that are just a little silly. In a moment, you'll see a video that actually features the fairy Earmother up on your slide. Other fun ideas we've seen, an oil and gas company during turnaround assigned an ice cream man who would drive around with frozen electrolyte pops to make sure everyone stayed hydrated. Another company that felt they had too many strain injuries started a program called Warm Up Rewards. So they provided coffee and breakfast to workers who did an optional 10-minute warm up. So they can't make them do it, but they can bribe them. And he actually found that workers would often just get bored waiting and go ahead and join in. So humor, fun, and encouragement brings us to what is probably the silliest safety video we've ever made, but it's a customer favorite, and it goes a long way toward helping workers remember to wear their earplugs.
I don't think these earplugs are in right. I'll swear I'm like this.
Are you sure that's a good idea?
Who are you?
I am your fairy Earmother.
Who's that security guard?
It's right in your hand, silly. Earplugs are like a security guard for your ears. Studies have shown that workers with hearing loss often report their hearing as excellent. But I'm here to show you the proper way to insert earplugs to save your workers' hearing. You reach over your head with your opposite hand and pull the top of your ear to open the ear canal. Pay attention to what kind of earplug you have, because you'll put them in differently. Since we don't all have fairy Earmothers, teach your workers the proper way to insert earplugs, because saving your workers' hearing will always sound like a good idea.
All right, so to finish up our talk about compliance, we'd like to know, what is your biggest compliance issue? All right, so yeah, a lot of workers forgetting PPE, workers spreading bad habits. We actually have a video on that. If people are interested at the end, again, we'll give you where to find that. Uncomfortable PPE, lots of things definitely affecting the compliance issues. So no matter what your issues are, there are always solutions. Thinking back to the OSHA quote from the beginning, that the best safety cultures involve and engage every worker, let's talk about how empowerment and rewards can get people engaged. So we all know how people work. We're much more likely to get engaged in our job when we feel empowered and rewarded. Even with workers on the line, there are lots of great ideas for helping them feel that buy-in and get them on board for safety. So first, have an open safety committee. We'll talk more about this in a minute when we talk about safety minions, but allowing any worker to at least take a rotation on your safety committee is effective for empowering and involving everyone. And it gives you access to information that only a regular worker might see and management might miss. Smaller safety meetings. So by this, we mean maybe no more than 5 or 10 people. This is one we hear again and again. Not everyone is outgoing. That guy with a concern may not feel comfortable putting his hand up in front of a lot of people. But if it's a small group and you're encouraging people to speak up, it's much more likely.
That's important, Beth, for daily toolbox talks. And I know a lot of people reference that was a big training method. At the start of a shift, consider splitting people up. They'll feel more comfortable speaking up in a smaller meeting setting.
Yeah, absolutely. Another idea is to implement PPE evaluation, so sometimes called wear testing. Allowing workers to have a say in what PPE you choose can have a significant impact on compliance and engagement. One safety manager we talked to found that starting a worker wear testing program made cuts at his facility drop by 85%. And the point here again is that when people feel bought into the process, they feel ownership. A safety professional in the construction industry told us that if workers participated in wear testing and then he saw them without their PPE, he would ask them, why aren't you wearing that glove you picked out? It's an easy reminder that they are part of the process. They're not just being told what to do. Everyday empowerment. So like the PPE evaluation, it's the concept of letting workers make decisions. Just about everyone we talk to has some form of a take 5 for safety policy. So whether that means workers know they can take 5 minutes before starting a job to make sure everything is in place, or if it's a 5-item checklist that everyone has in their pocket, or even a policy of letting people take a 5-minute break at any time, or even call a brief halt on the line to step back and take 5 minutes to make sure they're working safely. It's letting people know that safety is the priority and they can take the time for it at their discretion. Taking the work stop idea to the next level, most companies do empower workers to call a halt to work if they see something dangerous going on. But another safety manager we spoke to made a point of recording any good stories that came out of these stops and read them out at the next safety meeting. So he would give credit to the worker who called the stop and really make a big deal out of it, letting everybody know this was the right thing to do. And of course, it's incredibly important to avoid blame culture. Nobody wants to be a snitch, but if you spin it right, that ratting out Jane or Joe becomes taking care of Jane or Joe. If your workers know your reaction to finding out someone is being unsafe is to send them back to training, they'll be willing to bring it up. If they know you'll react by writing them up or firing them, it might be a different story. So we've talked a lot about recognition and rewards, but this one comes with an important distinction. Offer rewards for safety vigilance, not for lack of accidents. I actually took a class led by Cassandra Dillon, a 20-year safety professional who teaches now, and she told us about having to involve the police in a situation when she found out workers were actually threatening people to keep them from reporting incidents because the company had a no incidents reward policy. Rewards for reporting existing or potential hazards is a much better alternative. The truth is it pays off much more to reward things like new ideas to improve safety. So another manufacturing company has a program called safety sightings. So workers were asked to report hazards and potential problems as soon as they became aware of them. The more safety hazards a worker reported, the more rewards they earned. So each quarter, a new member was awarded a special parking spot or a gift card based on their accumulated safety sightings. And they found it was a great way to get workers involved. fun safety awareness events. Another safety manager we spoke to in the aviation industry designated special months that he called near miss madness, with special prizes for finding unsafe situations in the plant. There's simple recognition for good safety practices. For here there are so many options. You can give out cool safety glasses, gift cards, even a special parking space if you don't have the budget to give away monetary things. And it really can be easy to call out your safety superstars.
I'm not sure about you, but I'm a bit of a foodie, and food can certainly be a comforting reminder. In this season, I have several customers who've purchased pre-wrapped sandwiches or donuts from local smaller businesses once they've reached X number of good safety suggestions submitted to the safety manager. It's a win-win to help reinforce safety while keeping area restaurants going.
And we all know food motivates everybody.
Definitely. Beyond those little things, sometimes it pays to offer more elaborate recognition. I talked to a safety manager who really liked to pull out all the stops. She'd have quarterly dinners as her safety meetings that included the entire workforce. She also replaced what she called her boring annual safety meeting with a yearly carnival where workers played games that communicated safety data. It made a day that people looked forward to instead of a day that they would usually dread.
And let's not forget the everyday reward of your caring and concern. So there's a saying, hurt people, which is so appropriate for safety. If workers don't think you care about their needs, or if their needs are being missed or ignored, they're not going to take safety seriously. And I know I'm preaching to the choir when I say small things like rewards, communication, participation, listening, all these things build a positive atmosphere that people want to keep going and want to participate in. There's really nothing quite like feeling that you're cared about, like it matters to someone if you're okay. And these are the things that allow you to keep everyone engaged so you can find and fix hazards before they become a problem. So last but certainly not least, let's talk about cultivating your safety minions. So we joke about using this term, but this is really about finding your safety leaders for better engagement. So where to find these people? You can cultivate your leaders by getting to know them in a more one-on-one setting. So maybe arrange a weekly lunch or break time with each worker who shows promise. Take time to talk and get to know where they see themselves in 5 years, maybe even 10 years. Mentors is our first point here. So we already talked about mentorship, but people you choose to mentor others are obvious candidates for safety leadership. PPE ambassadors, so we're talking about people with a good attitude about compliance. We talked to a safety manager in the refrigeration industry who was dealing with a lot of old timers who had been around when safety gloves were optional in the facility. So it was mandatory now, but lots of workers resisted it. And he found success by recruiting workers with a positive attitude about wearing gloves. He loaded them up with the right PPE and sent them out to show and tell others about the benefits of what they were wearing. So, you know, my hands stay dry, my skin isn't getting roughed up, I don't have little cuts and bruises. And hearing it from their peers was a great way to convince people without coming down hard on them. Safety committee volunteers. We're talking here about mixing up your safety committee. So including a mix of salaried and hourly employees and stakeholders from different departments could really help you to discover leaders at all levels of your organization. Ambitious workers, lastly, an oil and gas company we talked to consciously aligned safety with climbing the corporate ladder. So if you want to get promoted after your first year, you had to demonstrate that you'd done something to improve safety outside of your immediate work area. And they told us that they had trouble filling safety committees before implementing this policy. But afterward, they had a wait list for every single one of their safety committees and a wait list to rotate onto their industrial fire brigade. So anyone who was serious about their career was on board and making a contribution to the company's safety mission. It was really a great example of top-down safety culture.
Yes, people like to be heard. If you have those employees who demonstrate positive feedback and want to climb the ladder, these people are usually great safety minion prospects. Being on the safety committee can be an opportunity for them to step up.
Yeah, it really all comes back to the same concepts of involvement and reward. So our last poll of the day, as a safety provider, we'd like to know, what are your biggest application hazards? And obviously choose all that apply. No surprises here, have to say. Cuts, lacerations are almost always, when we talk to people, those tend to be the top, absolutely. Fall protection, huge as well. Really, we've got an array. All right, and as promised, we've been telling you about all the free tools that you can download from our website. And if you head over to magidglove.com/safety-matters, you can find lots of free training downloads along with safety articles on everything safety to help make your job easier. And while you're there, you can also sign up for our weekly newsletter to get all the best in safety matters delivered to your inbox each week. And I think it looks like we had perhaps a couple of questions in the chat.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for great information, Beth and Kathie. I believe we could all use many of those strategies you have just shared with us. So let's see if we have any question for both. If you haven't already done so, please submit your question via chat function. Stephanie, do we have any question to Beth and Kathie?
We do have a couple, and keep them coming if anyone has any in the chat. Our first one is, what safety tips do you have for production lines?
And I think we may have answered that question a little bit after the person asked it. I think that question got asked before we talked about some of the Take 5 kind of empowerment and adding people to your safety committee. I think that a lot of those tips in terms of everyday rewards, everyday empowerment, giving people rewards for identifying safety hazards that they see in the midst of their job. Those are really the things that I think hit the people on the line, as well as people who are a little higher up.
Definitely. And I would also add the ability, just kind of reinforcing the ability to stop work. That's really critical. If they feel that something's unsafe, empower them and allow them to be able to do that.
And empower them with the idea that this is not going to get someone in trouble. This is not going to cause a problem for others, that it's that whole mentality of taking care of each other and looking out for each other's welfare, which is really that stage 4 of safety culture that we talked about in the very beginning.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you, ladies. One more question. What changes have you seen in training methods with the onset of COVID? And how have any of those changes that you've made and how you've been training or rewarding, all of those things, have any of those changes, are those going to stay the way they've changed for COVID? Are you going to keep that way of doing things going forward?
I would say what we're hearing a lot more of is we've certainly had a lot more people wanting those slide decks that we talked about, because of course sometimes the training has to be remote at this point because of COVID. And I think what we're hearing about as well is smaller training sessions. So instead of the big room full of people doing what they're doing, maybe you've got 10 people spread out in a room and you're having more frequent sessions, that kind of thing. So, hopefully as things get a little better, we can mask up and have more people and not have things be so virtual. But I think really, I don't know that people have changed enormously what they're doing other than to shrink it down and to spread it out. The other thing, however, that we've definitely seen interest in is training videos, especially little brief training reminder videos. Sending those to people's phones, sending them to people's emails, just little brief, what we call micro-learning, just a quick hit of don't forget your ladder safety tips or whatever, rather than a whole big class, because those are really cumbersome now.
I'd also add hats off to all the safety managers that are on this call, because they were the hardest working team of people during the pandemic. They had to figure out and just reassess so many different processes. So great job to everybody, because it was a stressful time. And then they have to add, figuring out reinventing the wheel, if you will, on keeping everyone safe. So good job.
And that's all the questions we have for you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so once again, special appreciation goes to our 2021 Spring Safety Seminar sponsor, gold sponsored by Construction Advancement Foundation, also known as a CAF, and silver sponsored by Total Safety. Our next speaker joined us from Cargill. Debbie Martin is a behavior-based safety, human organizational performance, or HOP facilitator for Cargill Hammond, and has been with Cargill for 30 years. She's the SME for HOP for Cargill North America, and currently assisting in the rollout of HOP throughout different business units. When she isn't working, Debbie enjoys camping, boating, fishing, and going on beach vacations. She's married with one grown daughter and 2 rescue dogs that are her current babies. Again, if you have any question to Debbie, please submit your question through the chat function. This way we could address your question after her presentation. Debbie, if you have any movie clip, please be reminded to check the share audio box when you first start sharing your screen. With that, I'll pass it off to you, Debbie.
Okay, so I am going to start off with, if you want to take a minute, we're going to be doing our polling through menti.com. So if you guys can see my screen, can you see the QR code there?
Not yet.
Okay. Let's try again.
There you go.
Okay. So if you can see the QR code, you got 2 choices. You can go to www.menti.com and enter 76268623, or you can just take your camera and put in the QR code.
I was able to get there, so good.
Okay, so we're going to start with the first question. Okay, you guys already got started. So how many of you are familiar with human organizational performance? Awesome, that kind of gives me a good idea where we're at. So a lot, some of you not at all. Okay, and then one more question before we get started. Got a good eclectic mix on thing is, when it comes to, when you think of human organizational performance, what comes to mind? Something that wasn't meant to happen. Teamwork. Love for people, worker satisfaction. I know what that is. Okay, that's fair. Trading. Team building, very good. The way we work and how to prevent injuries and incidents from occurring. Ergonomics. All right, awesome. All right, so human organizational performance, it's a way to engage your employees, okay? Engagement, human performance is a tool that helps engage our entire workforce. So not only in safety, but in all facets of the organization, continuous improvement, delivery of our product, quality. So it's not just safety, but safety is how we rolled it out originally. So in 2002, Cargill bought our plant. At the time, we had an injury once every 4 days. In 2015, we started Human Organizational Performance, or HOP for short, within Cargill. And since then, combined with behavioral-based safety, we have averaged less than 1 recordable injury a year. Our last recordable injury was in November of 2019. However, we have had some near misses and we've had some first aids that we were able to learn from. So every incident that happens or every near miss that happens, it is a learning opportunity. So advocates, or as Beth and Stephanie called it, our minions, are employees, embedded contractors at the site level that have a deep understanding of HOP and are good advocates out on our field. And so our advocate team are a good cross-section between leadership, engineers, our embedded contractors, and our hourly employees. And everybody who is an embedded contractor or an employee of Cargill goes through at least the 8-hour HOP training. So this presentation will give a glimpse of how HOP is used within Cargill. So the 5 principles of human organization performance. Error is normal. Even the best people make mistakes. Blame absolutely fixes nothing. When an incident or a near miss or a first aid happens, when you start blaming, you'll never learn what's going to happen. So learning and improving is vital. Context influences behavior. Systems drive the outcomes. And how you respond to failure matters, and how leaders act and respond count. So human performance has its own language for describing things. Human performance isn't a program by itself. It complements programs already in place. So on to our next polling question. If you're still on Menti, what does the word accident mean to you? Mistake. Oops. I like that. Failure in the system. Lack of understanding. Stress, unintended. It happened. I like that. That's funny. Not paid attention. Fatigue, failure. Okay, so some really, really good answers there. And so people are fallible. If even the best workers, they make mistakes. So we must design our systems with those mistakes in mind. Okay, so if someone starts with the belief that something was an accident and out of control, they may end up in a very different place than someone who doesn't think that way. So I like that. Very good answers, everybody. Thank you. So human performance is a system. So this is based on science. It was developed by Dr. James Reason in the 1980s. And it started in the nuclear industry after the Chernobyl incident. And those not familiar with Chernobyl, make sure you look it up. So then it moved into the airline industry and now into manufacturing. And when we say it moved into the airline industry, I'm going to show my age a little bit here. When I was growing up, they had vending machines to purchase insurance before you fly, because the chances of an accident or an incident were a lot higher back then. Now it's usually included with your credit card purchase or through the airline itself. So when you think of a system, think of this as like a 3D sphere constantly turning, and everything is interacting with everything else. So the people are interacting with the programs, and the people are interacting with that person in the middle, and the processes, and the work environment, and the equipment. And if something goes wrong with the equipment, it's going to affect that person or the other people. Or if something in the work environment is wrong, it'll affect that person, right? So everything is just constantly changing, and it's a constantly changing sphere. And that person in the middle, that person is often the person that is making those split-second decisions And they're the person where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. So 90% of incidences, 90%, are either caused by the system or have a system component to it. That doesn't mean the person in the middle is not accountable, but if you don't fix the system, the same incident will happen on average every 18 to 24 months. So what we strive for is a just culture. Just culture refers to a values supportive model of shared accountability. It's a culture that holds organizations accountable for the systems they design and how they respond to the staff behaviors fairly and justly. So we want to learn from errors. And so let's see how HOP helps us work toward error reduction. Let's start with how bad things happen. Okay, 15% is out of the organizational control, natural phenomena, isolated equipment failure, and out of the other 85%, 90% of those are an error. So the definition of an error is an action or inaction that unintentional, that's the key word here, unintentional, results in an undesirable or unwanted condition, or leads a task or system outside of limits, or deviates from a rule, standard, or expectation. And so out of that 85%, less than 10% are true violations. And that's an action or inaction that intentionally deviates from a rule, standard, or expectation. But it can still be systemically driven problems. Could be conflicting rules. So if you don't follow this rule, then you're allowed to follow another rule. And it could be other reasons why people might violate. So isolated with no systemic drivers is about 1% of all your incidences where that person just chose to violate with nothing, no reasoning behind it. It was just their shortcut and they were going to do it regardless. Those are what we call our bad apples. So error likely situations. When are we more likely to fail? So HOP methods at Cargill are focused on looking for situations where we're likely to fail, and then we take actions to manage those situations. So the two concepts that help us identify situations where we're more likely to fail are called performance modes, this person, this task at this time, and error traps. So performance modes were developed by Jens Rasmussen in the 1970s. So when we talk about performance modes, I want you to know we didn't name them. We use them, but we didn't name them. So they might become a little confusing and we'll explain them as we go along. This was based on the General Error Modeling System, or GEMS. This person, this task, at this place and time. So if you think about it, we are hired to do an occupation. We're an operator, mechanic, welder, crane operator, okay? And within that occupation, it requires us to do jobs, drive mobile equipment, perform lockout, tagout, weld, okay? These jobs contain tasks. So lockout, tagout this pump, rig this load this way, and fly to the landing zone. And then these tasks contain actions. Hang the locks on the electrical and water supplies. Load is rigged according to rigging plan. Crane lifts load from its current position. And so what HOP is, it's improving our abilities at the task and step level. So on to performance modes. Skill-based performance mode has nothing to do with skill. Again, unfortunately, Jens Rasmussen named these. So skilled trade is different. All right, so it's out of habit or routine, not thinking. You don't really think about it, you're just doing it. And our error rate in skill-based performance mode is 1 in 1,000. So other examples are crossing your arms, starting your car and truck, and the only way to get to it is through repetition. So just for fun, let's go and let me know what you might do in skill-based performance mode, like not thinking. And we'll go on to the So give some examples of something you might do out of habit or routine. Eat, absolutely. Driving, brushing your teeth, drink a beer. Very good. Yeah, and so, you know, brushing your teeth, you're not thinking about it. Lock your doors. Very good. And when we talk a little bit later, when we talk about locking your doors, we're going to talk about a tool that you can remember if you really did lock your doors. Check your phone. Make coffee. Absolutely. Those are all things that you don't think about when you're doing it. Put on your seatbelt. So yeah, those are all done out of habit and routine, right? Thank you. So now we'll talk a little bit about rule-based performance mode. There is a rule, and I know there's a rule. So you don't have to know the rule offhand, you just have to know where to find it and that it exists. So, you know, it's your if-then situations. It could be written or unwritten, like I said, and it's like your written rules, your standard operating procedures, your lockout, tagout procedures, you know, in your owner's manual of your car. Okay, if you're troubleshooting, there's a set of troubleshooting guidelines. All right, so those are your unwritten rules. And if you guys don't believe there's a lot of unwritten rules out there, I don't know about anybody who might be married on this call, but you probably have a certain side of the bed. And what I did when I first started teaching this class is I took this challenge. Tonight, sleep on the other side of the bed that you normally sleep on and see if your spouse wakes you up and asks what you're doing, because it does happen. So error rates happen when you take a shortcut, misapply a rule or procedure, or the rule or procedure is wrong. And the error rate is 1 in 100, and that's from memory or less than 7 complex steps. Knowledge-based performance mode, not exactly what you would think either. In this case, you don't know what you don't know. Okay, it's lack of knowledge. So you're problem solving, troubleshooting. Engineers spend a lot of time on purpose in this mode. Okay, having questions and being surprised. So your error rate is 1 in 2 to 1 in 10. And yes, that is between 10 and 50%. And you can't think your way out. And so what we're going to do is we're going to later on give you some tools to help you make your probability of an error much better. So important of understanding performance mode. It helps us proceeding in the face of uncertainty, right? Which can lead to accidents and injuries. Making us aware of probable failure rates helps us apply the right tool to prevent that error. And using the right tool for the right performance mode decreases the error rate by a factor of 10. So after we go through tools later on, hopefully we'll get your error rates to 1 in 10,000. So air traps. Okay, these are the top 10 air traps derived from an analysis of 5,000 significant events. These are your traps that you're most likely to have an error. It is based on science, and the first 3, stress, high workload, and time pressure, they all feel the same. It's that fight or flight, and we'll go through each of these individually in a little bit. And our next 4, poor communications, vague poor work guidance, overconfidence, infrequent first-time tasks, they will put us or keep us in knowledge-based mode. And then the last 3, they just kind of feed into the other traps: distractions, first day following time off, the end of shift or extended hours. So understanding your air traps when you're doing a job really helps. So if you can all go to Menti again, we'll put up the next question. Do you work well under stress? Okay, we've got more people working well under stress than not. Okay, and you know, I used to think that too. So I'm going to hopefully convince you that you really don't. So you have those people that believe that they work better under stress. But what people have is a capacity for pressure. And some people have a higher capacity for pressure than others. So everyone has that pressure bucket. Some are thimble-sized. So if you know that person that has a very short fuse, okay, they probably have that thimble-sized pressure bucket. It doesn't take much for that pressure to turn into stress, all right? And other people have a 55-gallon size pressure bucket, right? So for those of you who were in the military, I want you to think about what that basic training was like and what they were trying to do with basic training. They were trying to increase your capacity for stress. And our Navy SEALs, they just like have a huge capacity for stress, right? But one thing for sure is when your pressure bucket turns into stress, you start seeing it and your heart rate increases, your blood pressure increases, your adrenaline starts to flow, you get that fight or flight. All right, these physiological responses are because of human nature. We do not make good decisions under stress. So for all of you that entered yes on stress, most likely you just have a really, really good high pressure bucket, probably along the 55-gallon drum size. So I'm just going to show a little video here. And there is a little profanity at the end. And it is meant to be quiet right now too. You see him shaking? I would think him being a hunter that he probably just froze, right? So, you know, I know it might be illegal to shoot a bear, but I would hope that if that bear was coming up towards me, I would have probably shot him. So anyway, that was a good demonstration. You could just see him shaking in the background and, you know, he was pretty nervous there. So on to high workload. So how many of you think you're good multitaskers, right? Many of you might think you're a good multitasker. So 2% of humans are capable of true multitasking. So that's my disclosure. But multitasking is having two or more multiple simultaneous conscious thoughts or actions. So back to performance modes. Okay, if you're in skill-based performance mode, not thinking, you can do a task in skill-based in performance mode and also be like talking on the phone and listening to a conversation, because normally walking is a skill-based performance mode. So you can walk and talk at the same time, so to speak. But the majority of people task segment. So that's moving your attention quickly between multiple tasks. So an example of multitasking is when you hear that interpreter, or you see that interpreter, right? So you hear somebody speaking, the interpreter, sign language interpreter at the same time, they're using sign language and they're doing it at the exact same time. They're probably truly multitasking. But sometimes you'll see that interpreter listen and then do their sign language. They probably are just task segmenting very fast. So, how do we deal with this? Can we get rid of it? We can't, right? So we have to prioritize. So that's another air trap. So let's talk about task focus via situational awareness. And this is actually something that you're going to really have to pay attention to.
This is a test of selective attention.
Can you guys hear that okay?
Count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball. How many passes did you count?
Hold on, I'm going to get over to that question. Okay, we got 115, 116, 112. $315. So good deal. A lot of you were paying attention. It's 15 is the correct answer.
The correct answer is 15 passes. But did you see the gorilla?
So some of you may have seen this before, but if you haven't, most people I do this with did not see the gorilla, including myself. Okay, so that's kind of like the multitasking. You guys, we're all concentrating on that. It's really hard to be task focused and situationally aware. So time pressure. Time pressure can be internal or external. Okay, time pressure makes us want to speed up, but what we really need to do is we need to slow down to speed up. And I know it's counterintuitive, right? So if you have your pile of stuff in the morning and you have your wallet, your keys, your badge to get into the plant, and one of them is missing, you start frantically looking around, and then now you're driving faster to get to work, right? But what you need to really do is slow down, because slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And as a timeline comes closer, time pressure gets work. So again, recognizing this trap does not make it go away. We need to get help or use tools to get out of the trap. And kind of the same thing, it feels the same as stress, right? You lose your dexterity, your adrenaline pump gets going. And so if you recognize it, you can use tools to eliminate it or at least control it. Poor communications. These are verbal and hand signal communications. Okay, people will fill in those blanks. So the person receiving the message does not have all the information needed to be successful. Assumptions and implied understanding complicate these situations. And so you need to be very clear and concise. And I like to give this example is we went out on Lake Michigan one day. My daughter flew in from California. We just had purchased a boat and, over the last couple of years while she wasn't here. And my husband couldn't go on the trip that day. So we all go out on Lake Michigan and we make it a girls' trip because my husband can't go. And none of the girls besides me had ever driven the boat, operated the boat, or thrown in the anchor. And so when we get to the place where we had to anchor at Boaters Beach, I told my daughter, I said, throw in the anchor and don't let go. And what I meant was don't let go of the rope. But she took it literally and ended up with second-degree burns on her hand. And what was common sense to me was not common sense to her. And that obviously ruined our trip for the day and had to go back in. But yeah, so when you're giving those verbal instructions, you want to be clear and concise. And so, you know, another example I give, Joint Chiefs of Staff told their troops to secure a building. So the Navy went through, turned off the lights, locked the doors. They secured the building. The Army staged people at the window with rifles. They secured the person, the building. Marines stormed the building, set up barbed wire, assault vehicles, and an external perimeter. They secured the building. The Air Force did a 3-year with the option to buy. Did they not all secure the building? So when you're doing, like I said, verbal communications, you got to be very careful because they will put us in knowledge-based mode. So vague or poor written guidance, you know, basically it's exactly that. You know, I don't know if you guys try to put furniture together from IKEA ever. It's very vague, it's very poor, right? So you want to watch out for these phrases: as required, as desired, when available, if necessary, if applicable, and replace them with if-then statements. All right, so if the air pressure is below 15 psi, fill the tire until it is 15 psi. Those are the kind of things you want to do in your written documents. So, you know, historically, safety has looked at the work environment like tools and rules. Safety traditionally hasn't looked at how the human interacts with that environment. And that is the most important part. Overconfidence prevents us from seeing what can go wrong. It causes that tunnel vision. All right, out of the 5,000 incidences that were studied across all industries, it was found in 75% of all fatalities. So you want to look for don't insult my intelligence. We're almost done. I've done it this way 1,000 times. Okay, what's the use? Or that can't happen to me, that invulnerable thing. And just remember, overconfidence is a killer. First timer and frequent task. Okay. Apprenticeship program, the son or daughter driving for the first time. All right. When we perform a task for the first time, we need to learn the subtleties of the task. Within that learning, we function in knowledge-based mode. So you want to treat anything longer than 6 months as a first-time task. Distractions, number one distraction today on the road is your cell phone. And I don't know if you ever be, you know, in the left lane trying to pass somebody and they're speeding up, slowing down, speeding up, slowing down. There's a good chance you will look over and see them on their cell phone. So when our attention gets diverted, we miss the signals or information about that task we're performing. And it can also increase our time pressure. And as we learned before, we are not good at multitasking. Most people are not good at multitasking. And then quickly, the last three are, you know, first day following the time off. All right, things change while we're away. When we're on vacation, we come back, things change. And it takes some time to get back in the rhythm if you've been off more than 4 days. So the air traps of stress, high workload, time pressure, and distractions are commonly experienced. And then those end of shift and extended hours. When we reach the last hours of a day or the last day before a break, our time pressure increases. We have more distractions. All right. You're thinking about getting back home to have adult beverages with your buddies, you know. So before we go on, if you want, go back to Menti. And give an example of an air trap at home or at work. Your kids, right? A lot of people working from home right now. It's different with COVID. It's different. Your kids are at home with you, you know, while you're at work where you used to leave to go to work. Kids with devices, asking the wife for a favor. TV show. I like that. Overconfidence, claiming a ladder to change a light bulb, right? Did you have anybody hold that ladder? Robert Hull's trying to be Clark Griswold at Christmas time. I like that. Cleaning gutters. Yeah. All overconfidence. Not wearing PPE because you're at home. Very good. Side family problems, chores, very, yeah, exactly. So, you know, that your air traps don't have to be at work. So all very good answers. Okay, that's not yet, unless you want to. So now we're going to talk about triggers and tools. So we talked about performance mode and air traps that can lead to errors. But what can we do about it? So let's start with what are triggers. Triggers are observable actions, reactions, thoughts, feelings, perceptions that something isn't right. Triggers indicate that an air trap exists, and triggers tell us to do something. Okay, so our 5 senses are triggers: hear, taste, smell. You know, we smell something a little off, we go investigate it. We see something a little off, we go investigate it, right? So triggers tell us to do something, but the one sense that we often ignore is our intuition. And when we know something isn't right, we have that gut feeling. You really, really want to stop. And when at Cargill, at my plant, we do encourage people to stop. Even if there's nothing to it, it doesn't take but a minute to stop. So oops is a trigger. So what is oops? It's outside of procedures, parameters, processes, or situation. So you want to stop when unsure. All right. You're finding yourself in a situation that you're not familiar with, where no procedure or process exists. Or you're losing your track of where you are in a series of sequence and steps. So when we talked about earlier about our 5 senses, let's take our car. If you hear squeaking, right, you know something isn't right. If you see the oil leaking, you see a puddle under your car, you're going to be concerned about that. Even if you know nothing about cars, a puddle under your car isn't good, right? You know something isn't right. So you want to make sure that you react to it. That's when you want to stop and seek out. So self-check. All right. The Japanese have this right. Okay. They've been using it for years. So self-check is the review of the activity to be performed, potential and expected consequences, ensure proper identification of equipment to be manipulated, and verification of the desired results. So self-check is used in skill-based, remember the little or no conscious thought, and rule-based modes. And with skill-based, what it does is it lets you come back into rule-based mode for just a minute, and it brings this thought back into consciousness. And it's a way to self-check. And the key here is to say it out loud as you are doing the task. So when I leave for work every morning, I touch my garage door opener and say, closing garage door, press the button, wait for the garage door to close, and drive away. And I haven't left it open in quite a few years now. So verbalized point and touch is a physical tool, not a mental tool. And I'm going to show you a video. It's a little bit lengthy, but it's got some good information. Maybe. Here we go.
Every visitor to Japan notices the unique way railway staff are always pointing and calling. It's actually a highly effective safety technique developed here in Japan. Physical movements and vocalizations are a proven way to increase concentration and reduce errors when performing any task. Pointing and calling help us to ensure passenger safety. The railways provide a service that's essential to people's lives, and these techniques help us fully concentrate on every job. This is how the method works. First, he focuses completely on the item to be checked. Here, the train is about to depart, and he's confirming that there's no one at the edge of the platform. He calls out the name of the item being checked and firmly points in that direction. When he's visually confirmed that all is clear, he calls out, OK. The practice is said to have been invented by a steam locomotive operator about a century ago. Japan's railway systems still rely on it today. Scientific tests have conclusively proven that the method is effective. We gave test subjects a simple task: press the button that matches the color displayed on the screen. Some subjects were told to both point and call the color first. Others were told to just press the button. The error rates were then compared. The results were clear. Far more errors were made by those who only pressed the button, while those who pointed and called made the least errors. It was very obvious. Errors fell by about 85%. Neuroscientists have also studied these techniques. We found that it increased blood flow in the front brain, so we can assume that doing this is also stimulating brain activity. Pointing activates the brain's frontal lobes, which govern judgment and attentiveness. After the efficacy of pointing and calling was scientifically verified, the practice was standardized. Other industries and businesses now send their workers to learn the method. Construction sites can be dangerous places to work. Here, pairs of workers are using pointing and calling to check their safety equipment. They continue to point and call as they move around the worksite. And in this pre-work session, they use it to focus everyone's minds on maintaining safety. Pointing and calling prevents hospital errors that endanger lives. It's used when dispensing medication, when checking the amount and type of drug for an intravenous injection, and to confirm each patient's name on blood samples. It's essential that we don't make mistakes when dealing with patients. This method is a great help in checking that everything is correct. The New York subway was the first overseas operator to implement this proven Japanese safety technique, finding it to be highly effective. The word has spread, and you soon might see pointing and calling in your country too.
So that's a very, very good tool. So when you use verbalized point and touch, and we'll get into the stats in just a second, and when you're in rule-based mode, you bring your error rate from 1 in 100 to 1 in 1,000. And when you're in skill-based mode, you brought it from 1 in 1,000 to 1 in 10,000, just by using verbalized point and touch. So let's talk about step-by-step. So obtain the procedure, make sure you have the right revision, all right? You use check marks or circle slash method to keep your place in the event you get interrupted. You use flagging or similar markings, and you take ownership for that procedure. So if you know a change needs to be made, make sure it gets changed. And we encourage all our workers to submit revisions. When those revisions get submitted, make sure you do something about it, not just put it aside, because the next person coming down the line might not know that little shortcut that person took or that workaround, and they might actually make an error. So when you're asking, I wonder what this step means, or don't worry about it, let me show you how we handle it, those are little triggers that say, hey, this needs to be changed. And so when you use step-by-step and verbalized point and touch together, in rule-based mode, it will get you to a 1 in 10,000 error rate. So, you know, as Stephanie mentioned, stop and seek out help. We encourage our people to stop. We don't have a problem with people stopping work, you know, and when you stop and you seek out that help, you know, you want to, you know, get it from an independent information source, your documents, other people. You can even do pair checks. Let's say you're pretty sure, but you just want to have that pair check, right? So your coworker verifies actions to be taken are correct, and you want to make sure you do it prior to taking that action. And it's your way of looking out for each other. So error rate with tools, as I said, you know, skill-based, habit, autopilot, using little or no conscious thought, more than 50 to 100 times in a short span of time. So when we say short span of time, we define it at Cargill as 6 months, and it has less than 7 complex steps or 15 simple steps. With verbalized point and touch, and that is the tool to use in skill-based mode, much like you saw in that video, it's 1 in 1,000 and to 1 in 10,000. Now that's what your error rate will be while using verbalized point and touch. You know, you got rule-based, step-by-step, step-by-step with verbalized point and touch. So now if you use both of those, you can get your rate to the same, 1 in 10,000. And there are other ways to actually make that error rate better, but we won't be talking about them today. I mean, obviously 1 in 10,000 isn't okay in the airline industry, right? So knowledge-based performance mode. When you take that 1 in 2, 1 in 10, and when you stop and seek out help, now your rate is 1 in 100. Once you seek out help, if you go by step and verbalize point and touch, you're going to get to the same rates as up here, 1 in 10,000. So a couple other tools is 3-part communication. It's used verbatim, right, for your high risk. It's exactly what it says there. If you're ordering a pizza, for example, even though it's not a critical importance, all right, it's my example. And so when I order a pizza, I want a cheese, sausage, and mushroom pizza with no onions. And, you know, I'll get it repeated back to me, cheese, sausage, and pizza, or cheese, sausage, and mushroom pizza with no onions. And I say yes. And when letters are close, it's very important to use alphanumerics, your alpha, beta, Charlie, and so on. Show and tell, exactly what it means. When I was growing up, it meant bring something to school. All right. You want to show that person where that document is, or if you're out in the field, you want to show that person on how to do something. All right. And if you can't find the answer, then you want to stop and seek out until an answer can be found. And so if you give someone a fish, they eat for a day, but if you teach someone how to fish, they eat for life. You don't just tell your kid your answer to the homework, you show them how you did it. So complementing HAP, well, you know, we got a few things that we complement it with in our plant. It's called the pre-task brief, understanding deviation drift, and deviation analysis. So we're going to go over it very briefly. And if you want more information, you can always reach out to me. So why use a pre-task brief? It's a serious injury and fatality prevention. All right, it's all about the conversation. It's not just a JHA. Okay, so PJAs, JHAs often only include the people doing the work. All right, our PTBs involve everybody that has a stake in the job, including the operators, the person that locked out a piece of equipment. You know, so we just want to make sure that we have everybody engaged in that conversation. It's the most safe and efficient method is agreed upon. You have a no or a go, no-go decision-making, and it forces the review of standard work instructions. So just a quick overview of our PTB. We're not going to stay on it, but this is what our PTB corporate form looks like. And what we want to do is we want to talk about what performance modes are going to be in, the tools to reduce the error rate, the air traps, tools to reduce the air potential, right? So sometimes that person that has something going on at home, maybe they have some distractions going on. Those are the persons you want to watch out for. And then we do the critical steps and what can go wrong and how we can control those. And a critical step is something that cannot be undone. So your critical step is like, once you shoot a gun, once that bullet leaves the barrel, you can't recall it. It's, those are your critical steps. So opening up a chemical line, all right, that last bolt or that first bolt, you want to make sure that you open the furthest bolt away from you. What can happen? You can get splashed by the chemical. How are you going to control it? You're going to lock out, tag out, verify the drain was empty, and also wear your chemical PPE. So it engages everybody. But we all know that, we have deviation drift. And so when rules do exist or not enforced, drift happens and people don't really know what the norm is, right? So you get the drift and then you get the new norm, right? And the safety threat. And then all of a sudden an incident happens, right? And then you have the investigation. And it's everybody knows. But what you got to ask yourself, does everybody really know? Okay, and I like to give the example of a hard hat. You're going from the break room to the lock room that are at an opposite end, and you got to walk through a production area. And, that person's always passing by that supervisor's desk with no hard hat on to go to the locker room. And it gets to be the norm. And then all of a sudden, maybe something falls off a shelf and hits that person in the head, and then all of a sudden it's their fault. So I want you to challenge when you hear everybody knows, what reason do you have to believe that? And finally, we're going to do a little bit on the deviation analysis. When an incident near miss happens or something of critical importance happens, we do what we call a deviation analysis. All right, so, just over quickly, was a rule and procedure knowingly violated? All right, we don't want to blame the person, we want to fix the problem. All right, so if that answer is yes, all right, were the workers available, worker intelligible? And when we talk about intelligible, it's according to the United States Health and Human Services, the average adult reads at a 7th to 8th grade comprehension level. So your rules need to be written for the level of competency of your workforce. So if that's that person on the floor, I would suggest strongly not writing them at a higher level than that. All right. And, again, if the answer is no, it could still be system-driven violations. If the answer is yes, it's individually driven. All right. And that doesn't take the accountability away from the person. Just keep that in mind. And then, let's say it is no. Would other similarly qualified people have done the same thing in the same situation? All right. And if the answer is no, do they need more training, knowledge, skill? And if the answer is no, it could still be individually and systemically driven errors. And then at the bottom, does the individual have a history of events? So we determine any possible individual capability mismatches. Maybe that person just isn't the right person for the job. And if they haven't had a history of events, there's something in the system that probably caused it to happen. And so when Cargill first took over in 2002, I was the first person to be suspended. And I was suspended based on their cardinal rules, lockout, tag out. And I made a mistake, and I locked out and tagged out the right MCC room and then went down to the pump and put the lock on the wrong pump. I did test and try it from the computer, but I didn't test and try it in the field, which is Cargill's policy. Well, I hadn't been given the training yet. I didn't know the rules had changed. I was at my 5th 12-hour shift, and I made a mistake. I made an error. I was tired. I fatigued. I was stressed. I had a shutdown coming. It was, 7 o'clock in the morning. I was tired. So all of that played into my error. And I had locked out that pump a lot of times. But this time I actually went to the wrong field switch, gave the millwrights the wrong pump, and I got suspended. With this deviation analysis, I would have not been suspended today. So that's what we try to look at. It doesn't mean write-ups don't happen, but people don't usually get fired for making errors anymore. So some more resources. If you're interested in HOP, Drifting into Failure by Sidney Decker is a really good book. The 5 Principles of Human Performance by Todd Conklin. Or, if you want to bring HOP, we learn from Fisher Improvement Technologies, and there's the address there. So I hope you guys enjoyed the presentation. I like that. Questions. Does the puddle on your garage door just mean you need to stop and top off your fluids off? Might want to check a little bit more into that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Debbie, for sharing various concepts and strategy or tools to improve employees' performance at our job site. Such information, allow us to see our workplaces from different perspectives and be able to incorporate into our workplaces to make things better. So now let's ask Stephanie for any question for Debbie.
Thanks, Joji, and thanks, Debbie, for your presentation. If anyone has any questions, you can enter them through the chat. One question we have is, what were some challenges that you guys faced when implementing these tools that you talked about?
Yeah, there were definitely some challenges. There's a curve with change. Change is very hard to implement. And what we did is we just kept it positive. We just tried to constantly reinforce that, it's a good change. And, you always have that pushback. But eventually it got to the point where it just became part of our culture, part of our norm. So, yeah, you're going to have that pushback, but just maintain positive and then just show. What you want to do is, when I say show, is that first deviation analysis is like, this person always got fired for this before. They're really not getting fired. And then after a while, stopping work, when you see somebody stop work, give them recognition for it. Make sure everybody knows it was okay to stop work.
Great, thanks. We have another one that just came through. Are there any specific methods for determining critical steps that can this be a contentious discussion?
It can. So when we define critical steps, it's something that can't be undone. So it usually revolves around our lifesavers, like falling and excavating and trenching, something that if I don't tie off and I fall, I can get injured or die, right? Or if I have a chemical line and I break it and I get splashed with a bunch of acid, I'm going to be deformed for life. So the critical step is something that can't be undone. It's not if you can get a bruise or a pinch or even a sprained ankle. It's more, if we don't do this control, we can get seriously injured or die. Hopefully that answers that question.
Great. And one last question for the program. How do you deal with someone who resists these practices that are being implemented?
So it takes some time, and we just constantly, try to encourage them to be involved and to be engaged in it. I haven't, at first when this all rolled out, I was part of the initial phase and the initial training. People thought it was just another program. And when people think it's just another program, they tend to resist it. But as time goes on, most people become involved, and you still have those few people that resist it. And those are your one-offs. And usually those are the older people that don't like change at all. And so you just constantly encourage them and, don't make it a negative thing. I really can't say that you're never going to get resistance, but over the last few years it's been implemented here at my plant, you've seen a big culture change. And once the culture change happens, usually the resistors go away.
Great. Thanks so much, Debbie. We appreciate it.
Okay, thank you again for our speakers today and our participant for attending our first virtual safety seminar. And I'm pretty sure Stephanie or Diversified Marketing will be sending out the survey after this event. So in addition to the speaker, I would also like to extend our appreciation to NWIBRT Safety Seminar Subcommittee members for putting this together. And Stephanie Van Diver and Kyle Miller with Diversified Marketing and Scott Del Rio with Brock Industrial. Thank you very much for your assistance. So that said, we would like to conclude this year's Spring Safety Seminar. So thank you for attending and have a nice rest of the day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.